On this episode of Discussing Donation, we're speaking with Kevin Cmunt, President and CEO of Gift of Hope, Illinois' Organ Procurement Organization, or OPO. Kevin's going to speak to us about the field of organ and tissue transplantation, what kinds of jobs are available and what it's like to work in that field. He's also going to address how the current COVID-19 crisis is impacting organ and tissue transplantation. So today I'm with Kevin Cmunt, President and CEO of Gift of Hope, which is Illinois' Organ Procurement Organization, or OPO. And we're excited to talk to Kevin today about organ and tissue transplantation and donation, and what are some of the career opportunities in the field, and how is the field being impacted by the current COVID-19 crisis. Thanks for joining us today, Kevin.
Thanks, Cyndi. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something I'm really passionate about.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you being here. Can you tell us a little bit about what an OPO does, specifically what Gift of Hope does?
Sure. So Gift of Hope has been around for a little over 30 years, and we were created when organ transplantation really began to become more mainstream and become more successful. And the federal government recognized that there needed to be organizations around the country in charge of organ donation so that it was done systemically and fairly, and the allocation of organs was done properly and all that stuff. So we were formed back, 32 years ago. The federal government said, we want you to take care of Illinois, Northwest Indiana, 12 million people, 180 hospitals, 9 transplant programs. And our job at Gift of Hope is to get those calls from the hospital when either a patient has passed away, in which case they can be a tissue donor, or they are in the hospital on a ventilator and they've had some type of neurological injury. And then it's our job to start. First, we take a look at the case to make sure that organ and tissue donation is possible, that we can do that safely. And then we begin to follow those cases, and ultimately we meet a family that suffered an incredible tragic loss. And at that point, our job is to rewrite the ending of this story, a story that otherwise would end with the death of their loved one. We want to rewrite that story and have it end with life-giving gifts of organ and tissue donation. So in a nutshell, that's what we do at Gift of Hope.
Yeah, and we've experienced that, and I can speak from our experience that it truly does change the ending of the story, and we've appreciated the relationship that we've developed with sort of we call it the family that you never want to belong to, but you're glad they're there when you've got them.
Yeah, that's exactly how we look at all of our donor families. They are part of the Gift of Hope family. The moment that they say yes to donation, they join a group of really incredibly generous and awesome human beings. I think they're the coolest people on earth. I've met very many of them. You can't really see over my shoulder, but these are all from services that I've been to over the years for families that have lost a loved one and become organ donors for us. And it's really the part of our job that I find most fascinating is the impact that organ donation has on our donor families. It's pretty easy to figure out that, we have a huge impact on somebody who gets a heart transplant or a lung transplant. We save their lives, literally. And that's awesome, and it's really great to meet those folks. But it's really more important to us, and really more incredible to me, how organ donation helps our families deal with a situation that they frankly shouldn't be in. Our donors are not people who are 95 years old and passed away in their sleep. Our donors are people who've suffered some tragedy that we really expected to be here for us. And so that opportunity to rewrite those stories is really pretty precious.
And we know, just from having gotten to know you over the past 9 months, that you are truly passionate about organ and tissue donation. How did you get into this field?
Yeah. So I'm an engineer by training. I went to the University of Illinois, and then I got a master's degree at Illinois Institute of Technology, so I'm kind of a homer here in Illinois. And I had a career in building power plants and large things, and I was a business development guy. And about 20 years ago, my best friend called up and said, "Hey, I'm running this tissue transplant organization. Why don't you come work with me?" And so I said, yeah, why not? Let's try something totally different. And I got involved with with tissue transplantation and donation. And it was incredible. The human body is absolutely fascinating, and tissue, which we don't, isn't really as publicized as much as organ, is really fascinating. Skin for burn patients, tendons to repair ACLs, cartilage to repair, young athletes' knees, bone grafts to fuse spines and replace bones from kids who have cancer and stuff like that. There's just an unbelievable number of uses for tissue. And I was blessed to work at an organization that looked at different research and development opportunities and partnering with companies, and we really had a great time. And then about 8 years ago, I got a chance to interview for this job as the CEO of Gift of Hope, which I had gotten to know the organization very well over my 12 years previous. And it really turned out to be like the coolest job on the face of the earth. I tell people all the time, I'm in healthcare, so like 18% of the workers in the United States, I get to go home at night and say, honey, I helped save somebody's life. I helped somebody heal. And that's pretty cool. But then I also get to talk about our donor families and the impact that we have on them. And so to me, this is by far and away the best job in the world.
And we know that being an organ donor and being an organ donor family takes generosity and a lot of courage. But from our experience, working in this field also takes a certain type of person. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the people who make everything happen
Yeah.
in organ and tissue transplantation and Gift of Hope, and what sort of backgrounds those folks have, and what type of people get into this field?
Yeah. So it's a really complicated project. And I mentioned I'm an engineer, right? So when I was younger, I built nuclear power plants. Took us 20 years to plan them and build them and run them and stuff. And organ donation, tissue donation, these are projects that last somewhere between 24 and 72 hours. And the number of things that have to happen from, those initial calls and the people who work with our families on the phone and our partners in the hospitals and coroners and all kinds of folks. There's a whole ton of things that have to happen up front. And then we have this incredible group of people who work with families, our donor family services people and our donation specialists. And these are people whose backgrounds are generally things like social worker, and they have a gift of being able to connect with people quickly in a moment of tragic loss, and to guide them through our process. And really, it's amazing to me how these folks that work with our donor families oftentimes become lifelong acquaintances of our donor families and become really important members of our donor families' lives. So we have all those folks, and then we have the best ICU nurses in the country work for Gift of Hope. And I say that in all seriousness because we're in the critical care units at our hospitals. That's where donation happens. And so these nurses work with us and they see what we do. And so we get only the best nurses because everybody wants to come work for Gift of Hope because we just have this really, really cool mission and a really exciting job. Our nurses get to do more stuff than a regular nurse. We send them up to do all kinds of different training, and they have a really challenging job because they're trying to manage and take care of someone whose brain has died, but whose organs are still viable. And so we're trying to keep those organs alive and find the right recipients. And then there's a whole pile of folks who work on kind of the back end of the process where once we find the right recipients for those organs, we have to go to the operating room, and we have really cool people like Dr. J and Dr. A who actually go in and do the surgery to recover the organs. We have a transportation team that moves those organs all over the country. We have a lab. We have one of the coolest labs in the country, led by Sam, our lab director. And so that kind of gives you, we really have a really interesting broad mix of people. They all have one thing in common. They are mission driven. They come to the organization because they love what we do. And in a lot of ways, it makes my job super easy because these people are so passionate about what we do. It's just herding the cats and keeping them from getting too excited about it sometimes. It makes my job hard.
So you've been in the field for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and you've seen a lot of changes probably happen in the
Yep.
time that you've been in the field of organ and tissue transplantation. Where are we at now, and where do you see us going in the future?
Yeah. So there's some really exciting things that have been happening in organ donation and transplantation. You know, if you think back to 30 years ago, when the first liver transplants were done, the vast majority of recipients died on the operating table. Today, we have a 95% success rate on things like kidney transplant and liver transplant, and almost as high for lungs and hearts. We're saving more people in the last 7 years. Organ donation numbers have gone up 45% across the country. Our numbers are up 70%. Part of it is just because we've gotten better and better at working with our families and our partners in the hospitals. And part of it is technological improvements. So, you know, we're able to transplant more organs today from the donors that we had because we have cool technologies. I'll give you one example. So, we've always, for 20 years, when we recover kidneys, we have a machine that perfuses them. So we put them on a pump, pumps fluid through them, and we can see how well they're working. It helps the kidneys open up, and it makes transplant better. Recently, new perfusion equipment has been introduced for livers and hearts and lungs. And we just brought in some new equipment to do lung perfusion. I'm absolutely convinced that even with our current donor pool, we'll do 100 more transplants a year just at Gift of Hope, because we're able to take maybe a heart that wasn't beating quite well in the donor, put it on the machine and make some improvements, and then give that recipient a heart that really works well. And that's true for lungs and livers too. So that's just one of the innovations that have helped expand the pool of donors. We can make donation happen for patients or donors up to the age of 85. We can do liver transplants, and we continue to expand the number of folks that can donate, and it's really awesome because the need is there. I mean, we just have not an unlimited need. I'm an optimist. I believe we will find a day where we won't have a waiting list anymore. We'll be able to transplant so many organs that will end the wait list.
Well, that's an amazing goal, and I'd like to see that accomplished too, of course. Let's hope we can make that happen and maybe live to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to address the elephant in the room. How is the current situation? How is the current global situation with COVID-19 impacting the field of organ and tissue donation?
Yeah, it's complex. You know, as a CEO, your job is to understand the future and where things are going and make decisions so that the organization can be successful and your people can be successful. This environment has been the most challenging thing I've experienced, simply because the information dramatically has been changing literally on a daily basis. And so we're really struggling to find the balance between keeping our people safe, making donation happen, servicing our donor hospitals, and taking care of our transplant recipients. And so it's impacted us quite a bit. On the transplant side of things, for example, our transplant programs really have to make some tough decisions. You know, if you think about, say, a lung recipient, these are patients who obviously have poor respiratory function, so they are just ripe for a challenge with if they were to get the COVID infection. And then if we transplant them, not only is their lung function going to be diminished for a while, they're immunocompromised because they're on immunosuppressant drugs. And so you really have to think about, wow, do I really want to put this person into a position where they're super sensitive, where COVID would literally be a death sentence for them? Obviously, for some patients, they're only days away from not being able to make it. So there still are transplants happening, but that decision process is really complicated. Kidney transplant is interesting because we can keep people on dialysis for years. There's no reason why you need to get transplanted today, other than if I have a donor today, either we use the organs or we don't. We can't save them for, after this is over. So it's been really challenging on the transplant side, and on the donation side, as you can imagine, the environment in our ICUs, which is where our organ donors are, is really, really tough. There's COVID patients all over. There's concern for personal safety. We don't want to use a lot of personal protective equipment because our hospitals need it. Our families are not allowed to be in the ICUs with their loved one. So we're needing to talk to families over the phone. And so it's been really challenging. I cannot be more proud of our team, though. When you're asking somebody with a family and kids to hop in the car and to drive out to a hospital that they just saw on the news that has a bunch of COVID patients, to go maybe meet a family in the lobby or go see the ICU docs, it's really challenging. And the team has stepped up. We're still making donation happen. And when we come out of this, there'll be a bunch of heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, we've experienced the amazing people at Gift of Hope and in this field. And yeah, you're absolutely right. They are heroes, 110%.
Thank you.
So if somebody wanted to get into this career, this field, if somebody listens to this and has the desire now to maybe think about doing this, what are some of the ways to get training or prepare yourself to get into this field?
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend my pathway, which was to become a civil engineer for 20 plus years and then wander your way into it. I'm not sure that's a recipe for success. There's a couple of things. If you're heading off to college, or if you're in college, nursing degree is a spectacular way to get into organ donation. Obviously, we have 47 RNs that work for us out of our staff. And an ICU nurse is highly, highly valued. So, if you're interested, certainly any degree in healthcare helps, but a nursing degree is a terrific degree to go after and get. If you're not college bound, there are definitely jobs we have. For example, our tissue recovery technicians generally are surgical techs. So our junior colleges have really, really good 1 or 2 year programs where you can get the skills to be a surgical technician, and you can come work for us as a tissue tech. The folks that work in our call center come from all different kinds of backgrounds. Really, it's about people and your ability to connect with people and communicate with people. And then our lab folks, those are you get into the smarter people. Those guys, it's hard to talk to them, frankly. They know all these big words. But the lab techs are really great. They're biology majors who go get master's degrees and stuff like that, and PhDs. So there's the social work people, the folks that, are able to connect with families. So there's really a variety of opportunities. And I would just encourage folks, healthcare is just such a fascinating field. There's so many opportunities. It's a great field to look at these days.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking time out, especially in the middle of everything going on, and speaking with us today. Is there anything we missed that you'd like to add?
Just this was great for me. It's so good to see you, and I love talking about what we do. So it was a nice respite from all the other stuff that's going on, and I hope folks find it informational.
I'm sure they will. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin.
All right, have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
This message brought to you by the Maddog Strong Foundation. For more info, please go to our website at maddogstrong.org.